Hello, welcome to another part of our tutorials in advanced Android programming. Today we will see how to change from one fragment to the other. Okay, transition between fragments. Okay, I will also show you how I'm going to find out how to do it, because right now, for example, I don't remember specifically how to do it, okay, by code. And it's very important you see how, for example, I do this research so I can continue programming. I have one fragment, which is called first fragment, if you remember from last time. And that first fragment, it's in the content course scrolling, this file here, which belongs to this one, to the activity, okay? Now, these two here are really part of the course scoring activity, if you remember, where we had, for example, this button here, the fab button, which is this one. Again, you see the fragment is inside this section, which is the core here. Remember, be careful when we work here, because really we cannot really change this one from here. We have to go here to work with it. Okay, this one here. And the fragment, as you can see, it has, okay, a fragment name called fragment1. Okay, now we will change the ID to first fragment. Okay, just to call it the same as the first fragment. We'll create a second fragment. Okay, new. Remember, we go to new fragments, and let's put it with a +1 button. Okay, we will not add the factory-based functions. Remember, we will add here +1. Now we're going to call it second fragment, and we'll create it. Okay, now we're going to let it work. Again, it will create a much complexer with more options. It's not the same as the first one, which is empty practically. It has only on create. Now it creates with some other functions, which is the on resume and etc. If we want to see how it looks like, we just go to the fragment second. Yeah, and it doesn't show anything. Nice. It is possible that it doesn't show anything because specifically it shows like there is some kind of a problem. Just give me a second. Okay, I'm going to delete. I just want to delete this file. Let's delete them. Okay, let's ignore this one. Refactor doesn't allow me. Okay, let's delete the second fragment. I guess it's not there anymore. Maybe because okay, so it removed. Let's do it again. One new fragment. Let's make it blank, like one before. Second fragment. Okay. We should always try to work with blank fragments. It's much cleaner. Okay. Now the second fragment, it's also a blank fragment. It doesn't have anything. If we go here, you will see it's blank. We can take this out, or we can change the text, or whatever we want. It's practically the same work as we did here. Okay. What we want to do is that when we press on what we are going to program it, when we press on the fab on this file, it will change from fragment 1 to fragment 2. Okay. Now, I recommend, yes, I recommend. So what I want to do is recommend to make a small changes in the constraints layout. Okay. The transition between fragments will be done completely from a programmatic point of view. We are not going to make that transition from a visual point of view, which means that we're not going to really do it here. We're going to do it from the code. We're going to do it from here, okay? And we're going to take out this, or comment this code here. We're not going to use it anymore. And here, we're going to program the necessary operations and commands for it to do the transition between two fragments. To do that, first we have to go to the content here and delete this, the first fragment. And what we will do here is add a section where we want the fragment to be. All this is very important. I will explain how it works, okay? We will put a container. It can be any of these ones here. I'm trying to find which is the best containers. Layouts. Let's put frame layout. Okay, it doesn't really matter. But we're putting a dummy thing. Okay, this is a dummy. Why it's dummy? Because we are going to change later on this with the fragment. Okay, we're going to add an ID called. It is a frame layout. We're going to go to frame layout FL container. And we are doing that because we want later on to be able to access it from here. And we will define it here. Var frame layout container. Well, we are not going to have to define it from what I remember. From what I remember, we don't have to define it, okay? What we want to do now, we want to find out how to execute the transition, okay? So in Google, we go to Android, we write Android Kotlin Fragment Transition, okay? And we don't look into the official developer Android documentation. You can look into it, but it doesn't have a good, we need an example, okay? If we go to the example or to the Stack Overflow, I'm sure we'll find some code which will show us a small explanation of how to do it, okay? So you can see this is another explanation to do it. And in general, what we're looking at for is, okay, it's not precisely here, but yeah, it's this one, okay? but we are not going to do exactly this one. What we'll do is this one here, okay? This is these 3 lines which execute a transition. We define a transition, a type of transition. In this kind, it's called support fragment begin transition, okay? Transaction, well, they call it transaction, not transition. And then we replace a specific position with another one, okay? Now, we created a place where we want to add that fragment. What we could have done, and that's something that I was mistaken with, is to put back here the fragment again. Okay, let's do that. But the problem if we do that is that we cannot keep playing around with both fragments. I don't want to do that right now. Okay, let's leave that section, define FL container, and that's it. You go here and you will see there is 3 lines which execute the transition. We're gonna copy, yeah, and we're gonna go here to my core activity scroll, and we're gonna change the functions of the click of the fab. We're going to pass it here. Okay? There are some differences we will update soon. But I will define the 2 fragments. We're going to call it fragment first of type first fragment. Okay, no. Fragment second of type second fragment. Remember, we are trying to change between those 2. We will initialize them. We always have to initialize it, remember? And the same thing with the fragment 2. Second fragment. Now we have those 2 fragments at hand. And the final step we have to do is change and tell him here, where do we want it to, what section we want to replace from the view side. Remember, this is transaction that replace. We're telling him to replace this with this, okay? So we will replace the first fragment with what we call the FL container, okay? Yeah, and we have to add the assertion because we are putting here null, so we have to add the double exclamation assertion, okay? What will happen right now? What will happen is that when I execute the application, it won't show anything in the screen. It will show this empty, and when I press the button, it will show the first fragment, which is the one that has all the data here. You will see. I press and it shows. Why? Because when I press, it executes these lines. It creates a transaction. It tells it to what we want the transaction to do. It replaces the FL container, which is, if we go back to our, let's see if we can see it here. The FL container represents all this empty section. We're telling him to replace it with the fragment, this first fragment, okay? And we're telling it from the code. And then with the commit, we are telling him to execute the replace. You remember, we can do more stuff here. We're not going to do it, but generally that's what we do to replace from code, okay? But the thing is that I don't want really to do it from here, okay? I personally want to do a number of different options, okay? Let's first define function show first fragment, okay? Great. And if I do that, I'm just going to cut this and put it here, okay? This function will be in charge of showing the first fragment. Let's put another function called show second fragment, okay? And this one will show the second fragment, fragment second, okay? Great, now we have two. Now, when I click the fab, when I execute the app the first time, I wanted to show the first fragment from the beginning, okay? And when I click, and let's do that. Let's see if it works. We don't want to wait for the user to press the button. We wanted to show from the beginning both these two here, okay? And when I press the second fragment, I wanted to change it. Let's test it. It is possible that it won't work. Why? Because once we change the first one, it will say, okay, but I can't find it to make the replace. Yeah, it does change it. That's very nice. So you can see that when I press, it executes the second, it shows the second fragment. It takes out the first and shows the second, which is working. I want it to change. Now I want each time I press the button, each time I press here, I want it to keep moving from one to the other. When it detects I'm the first one, change to the second. When I'm the second, change to the first. To do that, we have to add another variable, a Boolean variable, showing first, for example. A Boolean that tells me if it shows the first or the second, okay? Now it's false until we put here true. If we execute the function show first fragment, we know it will make the transition and then the transaction, and then we can put this to true. Now, if we are to do this, it will turn this to false because we're not showing the first anymore. Okay, this is a control variable that allows us to know if it's showing the first or the second. Now, what I will add here is an if else. If it's showing the first, then we execute show the second. And if it's not showing the first, we are telling him to show the first. That is how we, using this variable as a support, we are capable of showing, of change the fragments each time we press the button. As you can see, each time I press, it makes the change. And that's it. That's how we execute transitions between fragments. As I mentioned before, we have to define a place where we want these things to happen. The container is just a dummy. Okay, it doesn't do anything. It just define a space and the ID. Once we do that, from the code, we can change using these lines here, which are only 3 lines. Okay, and that's it. And see you in the next part of our tutorial.